Hey Sam, I am loving all of the plant-based news that I'm hearing on the media. Can you actually tell me a little bit about what a plant-based diet is?
Plant-based or plant-forward, eating maybe 75 or so percent of your diet from plants. So that would of course be things like fruits, vegetables, beans, legumes, nuts and seeds, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a vegan diet. I think a lot of people use those kind of interchangeably. They say, I'm eating plant-based or I'm eating plant-forward,
Yeah.
when they really mean, I'm a vegetarian. So plant-based kind of covers all of that. You could be something like a vegetarian or a vegan. But what it's not specifically, though, would be anything like a fad diet, as we call them. So things like the keto diet or different things folks are trying to do for nutrition. So I was kind of alluding to some of the other types of plant-based diets because it does have a lot of them.
Yes.
Do you have any you've heard of specifically?
One of them that I really want to talk about today is going to be the Mediterranean diet.
Yes.
And that is one that has been consistently voted as one of the top diets throughout the entire world for years and years. Where does this diet even come from? Well, it's the people who live around the Mediterranean Sea,
right?
kind of in the Europe area. They are primarily eating the fruits and the vegetables that you talked about, the plant-based foods. And then you got your seeds, your nuts, legumes, beans, lentils, peas. You got all sorts of healthy things, including whole grains, which not everybody thinks that grains are even a good thing, but this is a part of the Mediterranean diet. But what are some things that they eat in moderation? It's poultry, chicken, turkey, eggs. And cheese and yogurt is also a part of it as well that they eat in moderation. Something that they rarely eat is red meat. So that would be your pork, that would be your beef. And it doesn't mean that they eliminate it completely. What it actually means is that they're maybe only eating it a few times a month. How would my plate look if I were to eat the Mediterranean diet? Well, if you just kind of divide the plate into sections, if you cut it in half and you're looking at the top half, if you fill it up with fruits and vegetables, you're going to be doing a great job already because half your plate is fruits and vegetables. Now, if you divide the other half in half, so you have quarters left over, if you have grains or healthy carbohydrates in that area, that is going to be 75 to 80% of your plate with the plant-based foods.
Amazing.
And then if you have the other quarter of your plate being just protein and limiting those red meats, that is going to be the Mediterranean diet. So there's a couple things that they really don't eat at all. And so it's a lot of things that have quite a bit of added sugar. So your sugar-sweetened beverages, a lot of snack cakes and things like that. But there is so much bad news about sugar. Can you talk to me about sugar?
And I think it's such a disservice just to society in general when we talk about just demonizing specific ingredients. Speaking to my experience with cancer patients, really what we hear a lot is patients saying, I understand I have cancer now. I can't eat sugar at all. My brother told me that, or my friend told me that, or I read it on this, cancer nutrition website or blog, or, heard it on Facebook, things like that. And, first off, if you're telling people that they can't eat sugar while they have cancer, A, you're wrong, B, you're mean, and C, you could probably use a little more ice cream in your life.
For sure.
The science behind all of this is that we can't really choose where we send sugar in our body. So speaking specifically with cancer, they're worried about sugar feeding their cancer and making it worse. Think about this vice versa. If you don't eat enough sugar, you're going to start to starve your body. We talked about how you need to get a good variety of fruits, veggies, grains, and things like that. Those all provide natural sugars. And in fact, from I believe it's the American Institute of Cancer Research, they came out with this awesome diet and exercise recommendations for cancer prevention just this past year. And it says, we should try to limit those sugar-sweetened beverages because the added sugars are not great for us. But like you mentioned before, decreasing red meats, maybe avoiding alcohol, increasing fruits, veggies, whole grains, things like that. So really keeping that moderation, keeping that well-balanced diet to still include things like carbohydrates. I think it was from the Lancet journal back in 2018 as well. They did a study that was talking about kind of life expectancy with folks who eat a lot of sugar or vice versa, folks who eat more of like a ketogenic diet where it's primarily fat and protein. And it showed that, folks who eat a diet consisting of about 50 to 55% of their calories from carbohydrates,
Yeah.
they tended to have a better life expectancy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if someone was following something like a ketogenic diet, or vice versa, if they were eating way too many carbohydrates, as we would with things like those sugar-sweetened beverages, that risk of mortality or just not living quite as long was, pretty high. So speaking of kind of the cancer benefits of following something like a plant-based diet, can you kind of delve into some of the other benefits?
What you had just said, it reduces your risk of mortality, which means that you just live longer.
Yes.
If you're able to follow a diet that is primarily based off of plants, it reduces your risk of having a cardiovascular incident or a stroke. It's also secondary prevention, which is just a kind of a fancy word for if it's already happened, if you start to change the way that you eat, you can really reduce the risk of it ever happening again.
Nice.
So what that goes to show is that it's actually never too late to start eating healthy, which is
really
a
good
really
to say.
positive thing. So a couple other things that it does is that it improves your cholesterol levels, which is something that a lot of people are concerned about, and something that I deal with a lot with the patients that I work with. Blood sugar control, people who are living with diabetes. One of the most popular things right now, I think the whole reason diets are popular is because it helps people lose weight.
Oh yeah,
So
that's a huge one.
yeah. So you had already mentioned reduces your risk of developing cancer, which I think needs to be said again because it's a huge thing. It can also do some different things like preventing cognitive decline and preserving your memory. And it can also help with your bone density, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Just eating well, it gives your body the right nutrients. It also helps to fight depression in some ways. Nice. Eating well can actually start to change the chemistry of your body and makes it work better.
It's really important to notice that with all of this kind of, I don't know if you want to call it junk or mumbo jumbo that's out just in media right now talking about nutrition, so much of it is just so anecdotal or so not evidence-based, where we know plant-based eating, on the other hand, is. There is good research for it. A lot of folks that advocate for this type of a diet include organizations like, of course, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, like you mentioned, the American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, the American Institute of Cancer Research, and the World Health Organization. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But because this is so evidence-based, unlike all of those, as we called it, fad diets that are out there, this is something that is very sustainable. It's realistic. It's something that's actually achievable for people to do in their own time. And because of that, you tend to see real results, real lasting results. And I love that because you're kind of advocating for a more healthful lifestyle rather than just a diet plan. Everybody is on these very restrictive, very limiting kind of as we mentioned before, demonizing or almost fear-mongering diets that cause so many problems for so many folks. This, on the other hand, if you're following it as best as you can, that's great. That's going to make a huge improvement for your life in general.